set this thing up to honor George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. And I just had some big presidential news this weekend. Unfortunately, President Carter has entered into hospice. So we're going to lose President Carter before long, 98 years old. Probably became more famous after his presidency was over. Yep. I don't think anybody really looked and said, Jimmy Carter was a great president. But afterwards, he did a lot of great things, Habitat for Humanity and a number of other things. I think people really came to love President Carter after he was done being president, especially when he was followed up by Reagan. It was like, okay, you set a low bar and Reagan just completely hopped over it. So that was good. So it's going to be sad. We know the news is coming. We just don't know when it's going to happen. And then all of a sudden, overnight, President Biden, who's supposed to be going to Poland, decided to fly into Poland, hop a train, and go to Ukraine and met with President Zelensky there. And they were talking about another $500 million worth of javelins and missiles and all kinds of stuff that's coming up there. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on this morning. Hans von Spakovsky is going to join us about 6:35-ish or so. I'm very excited that Kellyanne Conway is going to be on the show this morning. That lady has done a little bit of everything. Obviously, she was a trusted advisor for President Trump, actually very heavy in the 2016 campaign that got him elected. First female campaign manager that really got that done. So huge. She is going to talk to us a little bit about what's going on with dumbing down our system. So it's going to be interesting to talk about that and talking about kids need choice in schools. A hot topic in Jefferson City as well that's going on. Speaking of Jefferson City, Mark Harder, who is a St. Louis County councilman for District 7, announced that he's going to run for state senate. So we will talk to him a little bit later on this morning. Jesse Jane Duff coming up in the 8 o'clock hour, and freshman House member Wendy Hausman from Missouri State Rep District 65 is going to join us all in the 8 o'clock hour. There is all kinds of stuff that we have going on today. So we will get to all that. It is President's Day, so Ethan, I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah.
So little presidential trivia. I don't know if you heard this.
I'm going to fail.
It's you never know, though. So there are 4 state capitals in the United States that were all named after presidents. Do you know what those 4 are? I'll give you a hint. There's one in Mississippi.
Jackson,
Mississippi. There's one in Nebraska.
Lincoln.
There you go. And there is one in Wisconsin. Close, Madison. And there's one very close to home. Exactly. See, look at you. There's your 4.
3
All
out
right,
of
so
4.
you can make some betting money by doing that today,
yeah.
Right? So you can go into the office and say, hey, what are the 4 presidential capitals, and see if you can get that worked out. So we're hoping to talk to Matt Bennett later on this morning. Hopefully, is he calling us? Are we calling him?
I believe Drew is calling him right now.
Okay, so we're going to talk to Matt Bennett in a little bit. One of the topics that came up over the weekend that I was talking with a friend of mine who was a school teacher, and we were talking about the fact of how much these past few years of COVID has really hurt our education system. And I didn't think about it in some cases, but I live out in St. Charles County, so I'm a county councilman out in St. Charles County, Missouri. And we didn't close schools for the most part in St. Charles County. We were in person pretty much the whole time. So we didn't have a lot of virtual learning. Obviously, there was a virtual option that you could pick, and some families did that. They went virtual with that. But for the most part, kids were in school. But there are a lot of places around the country, they went virtual with their learning. And especially when you get to young kids, like think about it, kids who are in 3rd grade this year. In many places around the country, the last 2 years, they were virtual. They never had regular learning. So they started off really far behind. So you've got a lot of elementary school kids who just never got a foundation as to where they are, but they kept passing them along. So in our elementary school, we are way, way far behind, and we're really hoping to ramp those kids up. But want to introduce you to Matt Bennett. He is the founder and CEO of Christian Union. Matt is talking about the fact of we're seeing universities now go that direction and dumb it down. Matt, thanks for being on the show with us this morning.
Hey, thanks so much. Great to be with you.
It's one of those topics. I was just saying, having a conversation with some educator friends of mine over the weekend, and just talking about how these kids are trying to make it up in the high school level, middle school level, and especially elementary school level. But you're finding that that's true, at least in the Pittsburgh area. Universities are dumbing it down, if you will, for lack of a better term, to help these kids catch up.
Yeah, it's quite a concern. They're going in the opposite direction of what needs to happen, but there's such social pressure to go along with this that many are folding to it.
So what are we really looking at? I mean, especially at a university level, what are we looking at that is keeping these kids behind or not allowing them to be where they should have been?
Well, probably the biggest determinant for academic success is whether children have the father in the home with them, and also whether there's an emphasis on education and its value. And so with a large proportion of Americans in that situation of all different races, that can cause trouble and cause problems. And so where we need to focus is emphasizing the centrality of that, and that will help people attain higher levels. But just dumbing everything down is going to set everybody behind.
So what are you seeing that's playing out at university level? What are they actually doing?
Well, you see a lot. I mean, every university pretty much can set their own pace and what they want to do and how they want to go about it. Now, you don't see this happening too much yet at the highest academic universities because there'd be such an uproar because so many of them got into those schools because they're the top of their class, the top 1 or 2%. But in other schools where maybe they're kind of experimenting or trying different things by reducing or setting different qualifications or not having as many requirements for certain attainments. This is going into effect, and it's gonna cause trouble for everybody when they try to get a job and know the skills.
So my daughter is a sophomore at UCM over in Warrensburg, Missouri, and last year she had one in-person class. She did her whole schedule was all virtual, which I was very apprehensive about because I thought, wait, there's a lot of skills that you miss that are soft skills that you miss in interacting with classmates and just the social nature of being in a room with other people and having to get along. They're losing a lot of those soft skills by not being forced to interact with each other again.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, thankfully, companies are starting to realize this, and there are headlines about companies forcing their employees more and more to come back to the office. Now, they want to do it gently because they don't want their best employees to jump and go to another company, even though that other company will probably do the same thing. So the companies are realizing it, but there's not as much profit motive for the universities to notice it and make a change, and so there's not as much movement there the way it needs to be. Again, some universities, they're all back in person and everything's in person, but unfortunately, some schools feel like they can get away with it, and that's the way they go.
So long term, what do you see as the problems that we're going to run into here if this doesn't get fixed?
Well, how can you have the same level of attainment? How can you also work well in an office or you're not working well in the classroom? This has a lot of potential pitfalls for us. Now, I think we're all hoping that they'll see the error of the ways, that there'll be pressure by parents such as yourself and others to say, hey, this has to change, COVID is over, and there's benefits to being in the classroom, and it won't be a long-term problem. Now, as you've probably seen in the headlines, too, with younger children, many have been set back by a year or two because of the lockdowns and not being in the classroom. But it's not a severe negative impact for students at the university level, but long-term it could cause trouble. So I think we're all praying this gets resolved quickly.
So that is founder and CEO of Christian Union, Matt Bennett. Matt, we appreciate you spending a couple of minutes with us this morning on the Mark Cox Morning Show.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care. You know, it's a real worry when we start looking at, from an educational standpoint, how are we going to be competitive? And all the talk this morning is all about the world stage. What's going on? The Russia-Ukraine war has now introduced all these players on the perimeter. China is talking about backing up Russia. We're obviously working with the European Union to back up Ukraine. You have a lot of that is going on that's creating all these international pressures. And we're talking war, but there's a whole competitive aspect that's there. I mean, they're saying that if China decided to go invade Taiwan within the next year or two, we wouldn't have the armaments. We'd be out of everything within a year or so, just because we've been giving all of our stockpiles that we have to Ukraine, and we don't have the backfill. We haven't been doing the backfill to get them there. Who knows? There is a lot that is still to be determined. We will talk a little bit more about President Biden hopping over to Poland and then hopping over to Ukraine. What does that mean? We'll talk a little bit more about that. Hans is joining us a little bit later on this morning. My name is Mike Elam, sitting in for Mark Cox this morning. It is the Mark Cox Morning Show on St. Louis's home for conservative talk. This is 97.1 FM Talk.
Catch anything you missed today by getting the show podcast at 971talk.com.
Well, good morning, everybody. It is the Mark Cox Morning Show at 6:23. It's going to be a beautiful day today, up to 62. This global warming thing is really starting to work for me. It was 63 yesterday, and it's February. I'm loving it. In St. Louis right now, I would expect that we would have, I don't know, foot of snow, something like that, back in the day when we actually used to have winter. We don't really have winter anymore. Now, during the summer, we're going to pay for it because there's going to be bugs everywhere because they're supposed to die off in the freeze right now, but it's not really happening anymore. Although it's a small price to pay for me to not be freezing cold. Are you a winter guy?
I do like the winter. I hate the summer.
Really?
I do. I hate being hot.
I like that I can get into cool water, though, in the summer.
Yeah.
They have things called pools. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're really cool. You can go there. You can jump in. You can lay out. I mean, I'm as white as that Mark Cox sign right behind you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's. I need a little color. Otherwise, I just blend really bad.
I also, though, in the heat, like, it gives me extreme headaches, so I try to avoid it.
See, the cold makes me really bitchy.
Yeah.
So it's I'm just not that good.
We both have our problems.
There you go. But we're getting over it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys have heard. I mean, just waking up, getting around, trying to figure out what's going on. Happy President's Day, by the way, which means you're not going to have mail today. Government offices are closed. So if you had a court date today, congratulations. Courts are closed. You're not going to do that. What that also means here is we don't have traffic. So I guess we're assuming it's President's Day. So,
no one's out.
No one's out. But, of course, we are. So I'm guessing if you're up at 6:25, you're probably up and about as well. We also don't have news this morning, which is what we're here to let you know about what's going on. And the big news of the day that's starting off is President Biden makes this surprise visit to the Ukraine for the first time since war began. We are coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the Russian invasion. And President Biden overnight made this sudden visit there, which is funny because there were people from the Biden administration yesterday on the Sunday morning talk shows saying that Biden is not going. John Kirby was on Fox News Sunday, and he actually said that the president has no plans to go to Ukraine. While he was speaking those words, the president was on a plane headed to the Ukraine. Now, look, I understand. You can't telegraph that the guy is going. I completely understand that. And they were making a big deal this morning that he got out of a white Toyota SUV, which is very unusual because Biden is normally in a Cadillac when he goes somewhere. It's not about the brand. It's more about the fact of, was that vehicle one of these specially made vehicles like the president normally travels in for his protection? Because as bad as Biden is, the last thing anybody wants is the cackling Kamala Harris to take over as president, because as bad as things are going to be for the rest of this Biden presidency, it could be worse if she actually took over. So, I mean, remember, she is the border czar. So she's already completely screwed up the one thing that Biden put her in charge of. God help us if she was in charge of everything. But Biden ends up showing up in Ukraine this morning, meets with Zelensky, announces at a press conference $500 million more of aid that is going to the Ukraine. Now, he was asked about the F-16 jets. Are you going to give them the other military aid that Zelensky is asking for? And he said, we'll have more on that later on today when he has a press conference. So that's going to be interesting to find out, hey, are you really going to be giving them this other stuff? We seem to be slow walking all of the equipment that we've given them to this far. Everything that we've given, we have denied that we will give, and then we end up giving. It's kind of like being a bad parent, telling your kid, no, 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 no. Okay, here you go, just so you shut up. That's kind of where things are. So we'll wait and see. He's on his way to Poland right now, which is where he was supposed to be. So stick around. Happy President's Day, everybody. My name is Mike Elam, sitting in for Mark Cox this morning on St. Louis's home for conservative talk on 97.1 FM Talk. This morning show, my name is Mike Elam, sitting in for Mark today because it's President's Day. And Mark is a very patriotic kind of guy. So he has decided to take a day off just to contemplate what Washington and Lincoln really meant to this country. Either that or he's recovering from his bourbon podcast. Something like that. Either way, Mark has got the day off, and I get the opportunity to sit in today. Drew is out there manning the phones, and Ethan is in here running all the controls today. And so far, we've made it through the first half hour, and we're still on the air.
Nothing is on fire.
I call that a success. But when things really get serious, and you really want to start talking about the issues of the day, you got to call in the big guns. Ladies and gentlemen.
My name is Artem, and here is the news. 361 days less the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In his evening video address, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky informed that he held a meeting of the staff in a new expanded format. Both the Commander-in-Chief and the Commanders of Directions reported. There were also reports directly from the front line, from the Bakhmut and Vuhledar direction. The situation there is very difficult. Zelensky said that Ukrainian forces are breaking the invader and inflicting extremely tangible losses on Russia. According to the president, the more Russia loses there in Donbas, Bakhmut, Vuhledar, Mariinka, Kreminna, the sooner we can end this war with Ukraine's victory. He added that military issues, details of intelligence actions cannot be told in full, but Zelensky wants Ukrainians to have predictability right now and the feeling that Ukraine is moving towards its goals. U.S. State Secretary Antony Blinken confirmed media reports about China discussing the possibility of providing Russia with lethal military aid that could be directed to support aggression against Ukraine, reports European Pravda. He said in an interview with NBC that China has supported Russia for a long time, not only politically and economically, but also by providing non-lethal equipment. According to Blinken, if China provides lethal support to Russia in its aggression against Ukraine, it will lead to serious consequences, particularly in US-China relations. He also criticized Beijing's stance on a full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, saying China is trying to sit on two chairs. Later, US Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, said that China would cross a red line if it decides to provide lethal military aid to Russia in its war against Ukraine. It was previously reported that the Biden administration had expressed concern to Beijing over evidence it had that Chinese companies were selling non-lethal equipment to Russia for use in Ukraine, including bulletproof vests and helmets. Bloomberg informs that individual members of the European Union supported Estonia's proposal for investments for the joint procurement of ammunition for Ukraine's needs. A relevant decision may be taken at the EU summit next month, reports Obozrevatelь. Earlier last week, Estonia proposed that EU countries invest about 4 billion euros to jointly procure the 1 million rounds of ammunition that Ukraine needs this year to repel a Russian invasion. The proposal has received preliminary support from the Netherlands and Romania. EU foreign ministers are expected to discuss the plan when they meet in Brussels on Monday, and the final decision could be taken at a summit in March. In addition, the joint purchase of arms may be supported by France and Poland, which has announced the creation of a coalition to finance the production of ammunition for Ukraine. The decrease in ammunition stocks causes great concern in the EU, as tens of thousands of them are used up every day on the Ukraine and Russian sides. Although Ukraine uses ammunition more efficiently, it still consumes it faster than Europe is able to produce. According to Reuters, Ukrainian forces use 2,000 to 7,000 artillery shells per day, while Russia uses 20,000 to 60,000. French Minister of Defense Sébastien Lecornu expects the first IMX-10 light-wheeled tanks to be delivered to Ukraine at the end of this week, reports Ukrainska Pravda. In an interview with Le Parisien, the minister said that the training of Ukrainian crews on these vehicles is nearing completion. Commenting on the possibility of providing Ukraine with Leclerc tanks, Lecornu pointed out that not many countries have them, and their transfer to Ukraine by France will not create a snowball effect for mass deliveries, as it happened with Leopard tanks. We are a non-commercial initiative of just two people, and we need your help to grow. Share information about the podcast, rate us in the apps, subscribe to our Patreon. With your support, we are getting better. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky signed a decree to implement the National Security and Defense Council's decision on sanctions against 333 Russian citizens and the Moscow Stock Exchange, reports Suspilne. In his evening video address, Zelensky said that each of Ukraine's sanctions packages becomes a basis for working on sanctions with partners. He reminded that the next EU sanctions package, the 10th one already, is now being prepared. According to the president, Ukraine is working with its partners to strengthen it. The Ukrainian parliament delegation will not participate in the winter session of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, which will be held on 23rd-24th February in Vienna in protest against the admission of Russia's representatives, reports European Pravda. Earlier, Ukraine had opposed the presence of the Russian delegation at the official meeting of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and suggested postponing the meeting. Austrian Foreign Minister Alexander Schallenberg defends the country's decision to allow Russian delegates, which are under Western sanctions, at the OSCE meeting in Vienna despite criticism from 2,000 countries. Representatives of Russia did not take part in the summer and autumn sessions of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly as the UK and Poland accordingly refused to issue them visas. If you like what we do and would like to tip us, you can now do so directly to our PayPal. Check out the link in the description to this episode for more details. And as usual, you can subscribe to our Patreon. In gratitude for your help, we will give you access to a series of exclusive episodes on wartime life in Ukraine. We call on you to demand from governments of your countries to impose the toughest sanctions possible on Russia and its citizens to stop their invasion of Ukraine.